I joined your meeting and the states and then I needed to resist to step and then I was exactly. Not only for it was nice, but I really wanted to go back.
Yes, exactly. Like having like some
And still for you,
maybe I don't know. I'm happy for you.
I'm working at FAIS. At SAP, and here I was a teacher O sea, estaba aquí haciendo un cambio.
Que lo raro es que estábamos aquí a la entrada de casa. Y es de los dos, ¿sabes?
Ya. Lo que pasa es que para eso también había un problema con estos macros, que a mí me pasaba que escriben y comparten y a veces da conflicto.
Bastante que ha funcionado la tarjeta. Ya funciona y la acabamos, pero
being able to learn the concepts, all the tools required, all the techniques required, to set up these projects, as you will see today. And for all of the cases, they had to, when they started, they had to learn how to code in R, they had to learn how to code in Python, and all the machine learning behind it. So as you will see today, 11 weeks have done a great job, and they've done a huge effort. They're all extremely happy and excited to present today. So I hope you enjoy it. And well, I'll be part of the jury, but from now on, we're going to basically lead it and leave it now with Ricardo. He has a presentation because he's not able to be here with us today. So, Daniel, could be.
Hi everyone, welcome to the third edition of the Data Science.
That's music for you.
Hi everyone, welcome to the third edition of the Data Science Bootcamp Demo Day. On this beautiful day of December, right here at IE in Madrid. My name is Ricardo, and I run the Immersive Learning Initiative within IE Exponential Learning. I'm very happy to welcome you all. I won't be able to be here and to join you physically, but you will be in very good hands with Ivan and Daniela, your hosts for the evening, and you're in for a treat. The bootcamps have worked really hard over the course of 11 weeks, using data sets from companies the likes of Indra, Insight, Nielsen, Amadeus, and also Iberia. So relax, enjoy the evening, have fun, and I hope you learn a little bit more about data science then. See you soon.
So this is the welcome from Ricardo. And let me introduce myself. I'm not sure, Ivan, you didn't explain who you are. So allow me to welcome all of you to, welcome. I know you're very famous, close to a celebrity, but just maybe a few people in the audience didn't quite know who you are. So Ivan Martin is actually the academic director of the Data Science Bootcamp at IE and the person and the mind behind the whole design. Ricardo is, as he mentioned, the person leading this whole initiative within IE Exponential Learning. And I, Teresa Martin de Tortillo, I'm the person to welcome you today, and I lead IE Exponential Learning. Allow me to maybe just give you a brief introduction of what IE Exponential Learning is about, and then we'll actually dive straight into the presentations and the great insights from our boot campers. I'm really looking forward to that. So IE Exponential Learning, what are we about? It is the initiative at IE that is actually trying to deliver maximum learning for the time we invest in learning. So as Ivan pointed out, many of you didn't know what R was about, let alone machine learning, 11 weeks ago. And in just 11 weeks, they have been able to produce what you're going to see in a minute. So at Exponential Learning, what we think and work very hard to do is how do we combine the right methodologies, the right content to make sure that the learning is maximized for the time we had. And we recognize that even if we do that well, there's another component that's absolutely critical, and it's the network, the community of learners. It is the fact that each one of you can actually ask for advice and for help to your peer and to other people in the room. It's the value of that network. And like any other network, every time you add a node, the value of it grows exponentially. And so IE Exponential Learning tries to think about how to create the kind of talent that's today in high demand in the market. How do we give the data skills that are going to help those boot campers succeed and generate really powerful insights in very little time? So this is what we are all about. In this edition, we'll have we'll have 4 groups. Just wanted to also make sure before we head into the presentations themselves, that you know 2 things. One is we really look forward to the end of this presentation as well, where you all can mingle and get to know the boot campers. So please stay for a wine, a Coke, and a sandwich, and have an opportunity to talk directly to the boot campers. Secondly, this is one of the additions. We have 2 more starting in the next 5 months. The next edition is a part-time edition that starts in February. There is an early bird enrollment for that, so please do not hesitate to ask Carlos about it if you have any questions. And the second edition that starts early next year is the full-time edition. In the meantime, if there are any women in your teams who want to partake in the Women Challenging Data and have access to a scholarship, please let them know it's still open. So on that note, please let me hand over to the Minsight team. We're actually going to share the results of their work. Jeremy, you're welcome.
Good afternoon. Andrea, Wiechert, and myself, Sara, we are here today to talk about air pollution. So, clean air is a basic requirement for human health. However, it's one of the most serious problems in the world. Can anyone tell me the meaning of 1.8? According to the World Economic Forum, this is average number of years that people lose due to air pollution. When we think about smoking, is 1.6. Everyone is worried about smoking and the consequences. And what about air pollution? The numbers show the magnitude of the problem. 38,600. Any idea? The number of people that die in Spain every single year due to air pollution. 400,000, European Union. 3,600 million euros health costs per year in Spain due to air pollution. How is Madrid addressing this challenge? Madrid is divided into 5 zones. Each zone has measurement points that measure the quality of the air, measure the NO2 level. For each one of these measurement points, there are also 5 traffic points that measure the traffic in that area. What is Madrid doing with this information? There is a protocol in place. So what is Madrid doing with this information? There is a protocol in place. So every time that for more than 2 consecutive hours, the level of NO2 reaches more than 180, the protocol is activated. We have different levels of protocol: aviso, preaviso, aviso, y alerta. In the first one, the speed is limited to 70 kilometers per hour. In the second one, the traffic is reduced. Cars are not allowed to circulate in the city and park in specific areas. We will take you through some of our insights. We will talk about the implementation of an algorithm that allows us to predict the levels of NO2 in advance. And we will also highlight what Madrid is doing for a more sustainable city. Our data. We received data from Minsight. We looked at datos abiertos. And we have information about air quality, that is the level of NO2, traffic, and weather. For each hour for 7 months, from October 2017 to April 2018. Now let's look at some insights. If we look at the table, we can actually see that throughout the day, the high levels of NO2 tend to concentrate at the evening. If we look at the weekday, we actually see that regardless of the day, we have high levels of NO2. If we look at the right top corner, we can actually see that Thursday is the most polluted day. So today it's not a really good day. Fortunately, the protocol was activated yesterday. So if we look at the NO2 levels during the day, we can actually see that they increase and the peak is around 8 p.m. Let's look at the levels of NO2 by zone. We can see that the most affected zone is zone 5. From the 212 days that our data set had, 56 days actually reach more than 180 micrograms per cubic meter. However, the traffic tells us another story. The zone that has the highest number of cars circulating is actually Centro. Now let's look at weather conditions. So we have several variables in our data set, and we are going to highlight the most relevant ones. What I mean is actually the ones that are more related with levels of NO2. Temperature, pressure, wind speed, and humidity. Temperature has a positive relation with the levels of NO2, meaning that when the temperature increases, the levels of NO2 tend to increase. When we look at the humidity, it has the opposite effect. So actually, when humidity decreases, the levels of NO2 tend to increase. So now let's summarize what I've just said. So in terms of temperature, the peak is around 4. In terms of traffic, the peak is around 7. But then in terms of NO2, the peak is around 9. This is actually due to the greenhouse effect. Don't know if everyone is aware of the greenhouse effect. What is a greenhouse? It's a house made of glass where people grew vegetables, and the sunlight shines and the temperature starts increasing. And during the day it gets warmer and warmer. And this is what happens with polluted gases in our atmosphere. So the levels of NO2 tend to increase during the day, reaching the peak at 9. Now Vishu is going to explain the most challenging concept in our presentation.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Sarah, for that wonderful explanation of our data set. Now, I'm going to take you through the modeling part of our project. So to begin with, as explained earlier, we received our data set with hourly observations for each variable, and this structure of the data did not serve us well when we were trying to predict the level of NO2 in the earlier stages of our project. So we had to restructure our data in such a way that we could use the trends from the past 12 hours for each of the variables to predict what is going to be the level of pollution in a certain point of time in the day. So how did we do that? Let me take you through the process. So as you can see, this is just for one of the variables for simplicity. We are having hourly values of the pollution. Now, if I want to predict the pollution at 9 p.m., taking into account what has happened till 8 p.m., that is 1 hour in advance, I will create a lag which will consider all the values up till 8 p.m. Similarly, if I want to predict 2 hours in advance, then I will consider all the values up till 7 p.m. and that is the lag 2, so on and so forth. This was done for 12 hours. So we had historical data to compare the trends for the last 12 hours. Now, after restructuring, we decide to apply different regression algorithms to the data set. These are the decision tree, which works on the concept of splitting the problem into using important parameters at each level before arriving at the solution. The random forest. This works on a similar logic as that of the decision tree. But instead of one decision tree, there are thousands of decision trees working in parallel to find a solution. And DXGBoost. It has a similar concept as that of the random forest, only with an added technicality of boosting. So what is boosting? In a simple analogy, boosting means I'm going to consult several medical practitioners on their expertise and experience to find a solution for a severe illness. That is how I would put boosting as. So using these three algorithms and running iterations to predict the level of pollution 1 hour in advance, up to 5 hours in advance, we found that our results were getting less accurate as we moved further away from time. And so let me show you an example. So here you can see that as we moved away from the prediction hour, that is the 9 p.m., our errors kept on increasing. The animation shows you how our results were getting dispersed. In an ideal scenario, the graph should be in form of a straight line, which in our case only happened when we were predicting 1 hour in advance. So using this insight, we predicted the level of NO2 only 1 hour in advance, running the algorithms again. And based on the parameters of mean absolute error, which is nothing but average error of the predictions, and the correlation, which is an association between the predicted values and the real values, we found that random forest is the best way to approach this problem. Now let's take a deeper look into our results. So now you can see that our model was really good at predicting the lower values of NO2. And the peaks that you can see in the later part of the graph, we have completely missed out on them. So why did this happen? We had our training data with a lot of high values of NO2, whereas our test data had absolutely or close to none high values of NO2. And when I mean high values, I mean more than 180 micrograms of NO2. You can see from the distribution of error in the bottom corner, you can see that we are predicting well in the lower values of NO2, but we have only 4 values of high values of NO2 in the bucket of 150 to 200, where we found the error. So using this research and these insights, my friend Andrea now is going to provide you with some amazing recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Visrut. As we've seen, air pollution is a really big problem that is affecting the entire world. For example, in Spain, air pollution cost 40,000 million in premature deaths and 3,600 million in health costs. That's a lot of money. What is Madrid doing to stop this problem? Madrid will invest 543.9 million to improve air quality until 2020. This is according to Plan A, Air Quality and Climate Change Plan. This plan has 3 main aspects. The first one is sustainable mobility. The objective here is to promote alternative mobility like pedestrian and cyclists and to reduce the intensity of private vehicle traffic. Also to promote public transportation. In the urban regeneration, the insight here is that focus on the renaturalization of the city, also the refurbishment of public spaces. Another topic is like the increased citizen awareness. This is really important because here are plans to tell the community to do certain things like to create to do certain things to improve the air quality. Regarding this last topic, we are proposing to implement a regression model for the predictions of lower levels of NO2 1 hour in advance, as we see before, and a classification model to predict in advance the protocol activation. This is for the higher levels of NO2. But what was the problem with the classification model? We get an accuracy of 80–90%, but the sensitivity was only 2.9. This is, as Visrut explained, we didn't have enough data in the data set with the highest values. So we recommend in this case that to gather more historical data and to have data with the higher levels of NO2. Also, we are proposing to improve the app to inform the community. It would be really nice to have an app that you could see in real time the values of NO2 in the place that you work or live and the predictions for the next day. I've learned a lot from this project, not only about machine learning algorithms such as regressional classification, but also I have learned about how big is the problem of air pollution. So right now, for example, I know if I want to go for a run or a walk, it's better if I go in the mornings. Or here in Madrid, if I want to do some exercise, it's better if I go to Casa de Campo, because the air is clean there. So now for you, I recommend you to stay here because Thursday is the most polluted day of the year. So we have 3 more amazing presentations that you will definitely enjoy. And before I finish my presentation, I want to say thank you to all the IE professors, especially to Maria and Pablo, that they really help us with the project, and also to the Sara and Santiago, main site people who help us a lot with this. Thank you.
So I have a question. So your recommendation was to basically be able to prepare an app, so improve the app, right? To be able to tell me what was the best moment to actually leave a place, or should I go out? What you've also noticed is that in the morning we had way less pollution, and you mentioned that you had a little amount of actual high levels of NO2 at in your data, right? Yes. So the problem was. What was really the problem? Because was it because it fell on a warmer? You said that during the summer part, I suppose if it's warmer, there is less NO2.
Yes, you tend to have higher pollution. Yes, you tend to have higher pollution in the winter months since the air is not hot and the gases cannot expand. That is the science behind it. And in the summer months or in the spring months, which was our test, we had lower values of pollution. So we were training on really high values, whereas we were testing on lower values. So it was a mismatch in the distribution of the data.
Just to add, actually our trained data only have 15% of the high values of NO2. So actually what we need, it's not only for the test side, but from the train to actually train better our model.
You also mentioned that one of the things that you would require is more data with high values of NO2. So with high values of NO2, of course we don't want that. We don't want to have those values. But would it be enough if we had available data for example, the last 3 years? The same measurements?
Yeah, I would think it would be enough, like to test, for example, the classification model that we ran. Maybe with 3 years of data, we could get better results. Another thing is that we have to split the data because it's time-based. We cannot do like cross-validation or get a random sample. So that's also a problem.
Thank you. First of all, congratulations. It's an amazing project and amazing presentation. I have a curiosity, more than a question. I can see that you apply mainly regression methods to forecast time series, but why don't you apply the time series methodology to forecast time series? Why did you choose this type of methodology? I'm talking about them.
Yes, so actually for time series, we also need to make sure that time series have a lot of assumptions. Our data wasn't really able to meet those assumptions. So that is why we went for a machine learning algorithm, these algorithms that actually we don't have to have a stochastic process. We don't have to have a lot of things that time series ask for.
And thank you. And the second question is, I can see that you did a very good dive in this first initial phase around discovery on data. Did you read something about the theoretical models to explain the movement of the NO2? I mean, you saw very clear the relation in the temperature and the different levels of contamination. Okay, this is good, but did you see or did you read before something about theoretical models which explain very well the relations between the levels of NO2 and other parameters? or the result that I can see here is the result of this data discovery? Okay.
Yes, whatever we learned about pollution was during reading about, not reading, but exploring the data with the wind, with how it works with the temperature. So it was all in the process, and we did not read about it before we found the data set. So, yes.
Perfect.
Okay.
I think we have very good exercise now, just to check the theoretical model very easy to do, because you can find, because this is what my understanding, that what I can see is the results of the data discovery. I think it's very pleasant.
Thank you.
Yet contrast that what you are finding is in fact the basis of this theoretical model around the pollution. So I think it's a very good way to tell what is happening in the theoretical perspective.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So now we're going to have the Iberia group.
Focus on the customers that matter the most before it's too late. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Iberia team. This is Quentin, Beatriz, Hussein, and me, Gabriel. I never saw this coming. We can all relate in that phrase when we lose something that we didn't expect. Maybe you can relate it in a sentimental way, or maybe you can relate it in a business way. The reality is that it's painful. And for business, it's both painful and costly, because acquiring new customers costs several times more money than retaining the existing ones. The reality is that customer loyalty is decreasing. Nowadays, a typical consumer will switch brands without hesitation if they get a better offer. And this is because we live in a global and transparent world now, where a consumer can access information in real time, able to compare prices, converting products and services almost into a commodity. And this translates into numbers. And for the airline industry, it's 15% of churn. This means that 50% of their customers stop doing business with the airlines annually. Just to have a reference, the industry has a churn of 2%. So this is huge. This is a percentage that represents millions and millions of dollars for them. So what drives a customer to be loyal? In shifting the loyalty curve, this is a study, an investigation. They found a strong correlation between customer effort and customer loyalty, meaning that customers want more personalization. They want less hassle to buy the products, and they also want moments of wow. They want to be surprised. So we're bringing machine learning for customer retention to detect early signals of churn, analyze the behaviors behind the predictions, and act, stop them before they go. And Hussein is gonna talk about a little bit the process of the model.
Thank you, Gabriela, for this amazing introduction. Hi, I'm Hussein. Well, Iberia decided to create a group to fight churn. And they decided to give us the opportunity to create a marketing plan so that we can get the most revenue and to try to generate the most revenue with the least cost possible. Well, let me start by saying, what is churn? Churn is the proportion of customers that leave a certain company or stop buying its products. For Iberia, the customers were divided into two categories, the active and the inactive customers. Active are the customers who have traveled with Iberia for at least once in the past year, and the inactive are the customers who have not traveled with Iberia for at least 1 year. So we we got the data, and they were the flight information of the customers between 2014 till 2018. They were a sample of 3,000 customers and just under 15,000 tickets. And then we started thinking, what do we want? What is our target? Well, our target is knowing when our customers are going to be active or inactive, and if they are going to be inactive in the future, churning. So, to be consistent, we decided to split the data into 4-month periods, check if they are active or inactive, and then try to predict after a year and see if they are active then. And then take another 4 months and then check after a year. As if to take a snapshot of our customers and try to see how they are performing. So, So, guess what did we find out? We found out that 75% of our customers became inactive within a year. What does that mean? That means that we may have detected a big group of travelers that only buy a single ticket. Well, then we started thinking, what are the best models that can predict and give us deeper insights to our customers' behaviors and patterns? So, we used the decision tree to get the most important variables that can classify our customers, relation to our target. And then we used the K-means to cluster our customers to better understand their behaviors and their patterns. And finally, we used the random forest so that we can predict the likelihood of churn. Now, Beatrice is going to talk to you further about this process, and I would like you all to give her a warm welcome. This is Beatrice.
So the first thing we have to do to retain our customers is knowing who they are and how they behave. To draw that various picture, we have split our customers into 4 different groups. According to demographic flying aspects. If we take a look to our clusters regarding the age, the gender, and the nationality, we can find that all the clusters are quite homogeneous with these aspects. So the difference in our groups will be in the flying patterns. To group our customers in the flying patterns, we have pointed out the money they spend in Iberia per year, as we want to find who is the customer that values the most. Then we have some insights of the kind of flights they made, as the distance of the flights, and if they take domestic flights or not. And finally, we want to know if they are regular to Iberia or no. That means that, for example, if a cluster is low regular, it's going to have a few people that have a constant frequency in flying with Iberia. So let's put faces to our customers. First, we have the backpacker. She's a low-budget flyer. If she finds another company that has the same flight but cheaper, she's going to take that one. This could be myself flying to London or Paris visiting some friends. Then we have the tourist. This customer is the one that represents the great part of our customers. Bear in mind that the numbers in this presentation are average per year. So this could be customer flying to Buenos Aires once a year, or one customer that flies to Paris and Rome and La Coruña 10 times per year.
but all have in common that they spend around 2,000 euros in Iberia. And finally, we have the executive and the exotic. These two groups have in common that they mostly take long-distance flights. The executive, we are the most regular. We could have some executives in this room. For example, if your company has some kind of agreement with Iberia and all the working flights are with Iberia, we are going to consider you high regular. And then we have the exotic, that are the ones that spend more money. They spend more than you guys than the executives, but they represent just 1% of our customers. And now Quentin is going to tell you how to predict if someone is going to turn inactive.
Thank you, Beatrice. So first step was to identify the customer's profiles, the flying patterns, demographics. The second step was to identify the likelihood of churn, which customers are actually the most likely to churn. So we decided to go for the random forest for many reasons. One of them was that actually out of the random forest algorithm, we could get the actual probability of the customer's churn, which was interesting for us actually to classify them into the most likely to churn and the least likely to churn. So basically how it works, we are inputting all our variables into the model, and then it decides how to split the data as we go to the target in the best way possible, so we can identify the most likely to churn. Well, to measure the performance of our algorithm, we decided to go for the ROG curve. Some of you might already know about the AUC value, but for those of you not familiar with this kind of metrics, in this case, the AUC is 86%. To give you a point of reference, in the telecom industry, for the same kind of project churn, it averages around 70%, and in the banking industry, it's 80%. Basically, the key takeaway here and what you have to bear in mind out of this slide is the fact that the closer you get to the y-axis, the better you are at predicting the most likely to churn, which was actually our main purpose. Well, so what? Because the point of all of these amazing discussions about algorithm is to get back to the business perspective. So let's put all of what we've talked about together. If we put the prediction probabilities of churn and the clustering together, this is what we get. On the far left, you have the top 10%, so the first decile of the population most likely to churn. The 75% is what Hussein mentioned in the beginning, which is the global proportion of our population who are actually becoming inactive within the following year. And what you see on the top is the uplift. As well, some of you might know about it, but maybe not all of you know about this metric. Basically, what you have to remember and take away from this slide as well is that in that case, on the top 10% of the most likely to churn, you have 1.3 more chances to have churners in the top 10% decile in comparison to taking any given 10% of the population randomly with the proportion of 75%. So, always in the same kind of mentality, focusing on the business perspective, we decided to focus on the first 10% to make the most of our little budget and to invest wisely into retaining customers. On the first part, if you combine the clusters and the top 10% most likely to churn, you find out that the tourist, the backpacker, and the executive are the one most represented in the most likely to churn, and we have calculated the value they would represent should they fly at least once more during the year they are predicted not to fly. And then, to focus a bit more on it, we decided to focus on the tourists, which are actually the most valuable customers and which can generate the most value for Iberia, which is the most interesting point in that case. So, as a conclusion, to walk you through the whole process, the first step was to identify our target. What do we want to define? We want to know precisely who are the ones most likely to not fly again within the following year. Then we wanted to understand our customers' profile and their flying patterns. Then the following step was to predict the customers most likely to churn, to identify the most valuable customers in these churners, and then to retain them adequately. So for example, the tourist one, if we were to apply any marketing campaign, we could apply a discount for these ones when we detect they are flying because we know they are likely to churn within the following year. So the discount would be applied should they fly again on the next flight. And then, of course, we won't have the opportunity, or maybe, I don't know, to test this, but the fifth step would be to measure the conversion rates. Because, as you may understand, in the 170 million that they could generate, not all of them are stop flying because they don't like Iberia or they are flying with another company. Some of them just don't need to fly anymore because it's their life. So we're not going to gain all of the 170 million, of course. That is the assumption that we had. So it would be interesting, of course, to measure the conversion rates of applying this model on a regular basis. So we would like to take a bit more time to thank Iberia first and the whole team, Carlos, Alberto, Alejandro, Ana, and the other ones, Santi, Pedro, for giving us this amazing opportunity. Thank you very much. We would like to thank as well IE for putting all of this together, Daniela, all the instructors for being so patient with us and all our many questions, and Ivan, Ricardo, not here, but thank you very much. Thanks to all the boot campers as well, without whom this experience would not be the same. And thank you all for attending this presentation and listening to us. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, so I have a question. You mentioned that you've created these clusters, and you created them, of course, in order to be able to basically refer to the cluster instead of having to talk about all of this huge amount of people. Right? How do you decide which variables, or how do you decide what you should use in order to cluster? How is that process?
Basically, we didn't decide the variables. We run a decision tree. So the decision tree gave us the most important variables to the model. So we applied the variables that the decision tree gave us. And we apply the demographic ones, we choose them because it was a business decision. As you saw the presentation, they were not relevant, but we wanted to identify the profiles of the customers. So for the flying patterns, the variables were chosen by the decision tree, and for the demographics were our choice.
Then the final model, the final model was not the decision tree. The decision tree was only used to select those variables.
Correct.
Some of them important
Yes.
variables.
And how many variables do you have available? How many variables do you have available thanks to Iberia at the first step? And finally, how many variables was the final input for the model? How is the transformation of the input space?
So in the flight information, we had approximately, I don't remember the exact number, which was around 130 variables. And then, like Hussein explained in the beginning, and Beatrice as well, we had to think and to do some feature engineering. Some of you are familiar with this notion, and to create our own variables as well to give to gain the most insights out of this for this project. So we created the regularity, we created the target, and other ones.
How is the final number of variables to feed the model?
I think it was around 100, something like that. That was one of the reasons as well, which I did not mention for the random forest, to choose this one, because it's pretty efficient when you have a lot of variables like this.
Is all information that you include in the data set based on individuals, or also you include corporations, companies? It's based on the residential. All the data set that you use are just individuals, or you include also companies? Different. If you analyze the churn rate, it's completely different because the decision can be made by the company, not the individual.
There is a big
Customer flight information.
Be in mind that, you analyze both final finding can be completely different.
Definitely, definitely. And like there were a lot of variables, and they were checking them because some of the variables, like the weight of the bag or the name of the customer, we didn't add these because obviously they didn't add any value to the variables. So, but like the variables with the price, with the destination, or like the age, these could add like a new meaning to our customers. So we had to, these are the ones we actually did, we chose. And we depended also on the random and the decision tree so that we can select the most important out of them. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. If it is one thing we've learned about data science, it's how to effectively use data to look at the problems of a given entity and try to reshape it and improve it more efficiently. In our case, we looked into the air travel industry. As you can see, this industry has been globally showing growth across all regions, and except for one bad year in 2009, it has shown growth year over year over year. With passengers projected to reach 7.2 billion by 2035. Now, within the air travel industry, there is a hidden player in the background, an entity that plays like the middleman between us and the airlines or the travel agencies. That entity manages the booking, the ticketing, the pricing, or the search, and that platform is called a global distribution system, or a GDS. So let me introduce you to our client, Amadeus, the leading global distribution system in the world. Now, Amadeus did not only stop there. Amadeus also diversified into the ferries, insurance, hotel bookings, rails, and even taxi transfers. On top of that, Amadeus are heavy investors in research and development. Just in 2017, they have invested 15.2% of their revenues. That's amount to $360 million. And in 2018, they even raised that amount by 11.3%, accounting to $401.3 million. That's a lot of money. So that's why they asked us to look into the flight industry to see what problems they might face. And we decided to look into worst case scenario, cancellations. Now, just imagine you having a very, very important meeting, having booked your flight, booked your hotels, maybe even booked your taxi transfers, only to know an hour before that your flight has been canceled. That's a hassle. You need to rebook everything, apologize, reschedule your meeting. And if you think that's a pain for you, you should see what it does to the airlines. You see, 1.5% of flights were canceled just in 2017. Now that might not be or look like a big percentage, but that's roughly 83,000 flights per year. As you can see, it is even affecting the natural revenue growth of the industry. As more people are going to air travel, as more flights are going to the air, that is costing them even more cancellations. That's about $60 billion annually. That is also a huge number. So that is why we decided to look at public data to try and understand the problems that are causing that, and eventually build a model to try and predict and foresee that. And for that, I will give it to Jorge.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Rita. So we're in a lucky position to walk you through a typical data science project. And this, we've broken it down into 2 subsegments with 5 overall steps. The first is the data handling. So what do we need to do here? Well, first we need to extract the data in order to be able to analyze something. Secondly, we need to clean this data, account for missing values. We need to identify outliers and other such things. Lastly, within the data handling process, we need to explore the data to be able to extract insights and build hypotheses out of this. With all of this in mind, we can then go on into building actual models. Through here, we built a predictive model and then we test it for soundness. So let's talk about the data. We are talking about 3 years of data extracted from 3 different sources. So the sources are the Bureau of Transportation of the United States, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, and the FAA. From here, we're extracting 2 types of data. We classify them as operations and weather data. This includes statistics like flight cancellations, departure delays, and other such things, as well as temperature, max wind speed, min wind speed, and others. From the FAA, we actually try to extract a registry of planes to be able to build a plane age model and see if it plays a role within our model. With all of this, we can transform them and convert them into a final data set that we use for our analysis. So what did we learn? Firstly, cancellations tend to occur most frequently in January, March, and August. So whenever you plan your trips, take this into account. Secondly, you can view this in another way in a heat map, where you can see that in January and March, they focus on particular days of the month, while in August, though it looks relatively homogeneous, it's homogeneous across the whole month. Now, from a weekday perspective, the most frequent cancellations tend to occur on Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. Now let's analyze the airports. So the most busy airports are Atlanta, Chicago, Denver, and Los Angeles. You can see this around the initial parts of the graph. So we're focusing for analysis only on Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles. Why do we do this? Because we find that they're spread out across the United States and allowed to account for a wide range of flights that we can use for our analysis. Lastly, what are the causes of the cancellation? So we are identifying 2 particular ones as important: the weather and the carrier issues. The weather is something that the airlines can't really do too much about, so we want to bring light onto the carrier. Why do we say this? Because not all carriers operate in the same way. Some carriers are more prone to cancellations due to carrier issues than others, which hints us that there might be some differences in operation playing into account. Lastly, what do we want you to take away from this? First, threes. So we have 3 years of data, 2016 through August 2018. We are working with 3 merged data sets from the BTS, NOAA, and FAA, and we have 3 airports for our analysis: Atlanta, Chicago, and Los Angeles. From a feature perspective, we're talking about 2 types of variables: operation and weather variables. And some of the ones we created are 24-hour lags of minimums and maximums in the weather variables and to account for extremes. And we talk about operations, where we created a 7-day moving average of delays grouped by different factors, such as airline, airports, and others. And what do we want to do? We want to predict flight cancellations with 24 hours in advance. With this, I hand it off to Renzi.
Thank you, Jorge. Allow me to walk you through our process for building and optimizing machine learning models for predicting flight cancellations. As you have recently heard from Jorge, our goal is to predict flight cancellations 24 hours in advance before the cancellation is actually happening. In machine learning language, this is a typical classification problem with a binary target. Either the flight is canceled or not canceled. First thing that we wanted to understand is how the features in our dataset interact with each other in order to take the decision: is the flight canceled or not? So our first weapon of choice was the decision tree. Next, in order to improve the predictive capabilities of a single tree model, we decided to use ensemble tree models such as Random Forest and XGBoost. There is a pattern here. Everybody loves this. So what did we get? Let's see accuracy, for example. XGBoost performed the best at 93% accuracy, whereas Random Forest actually underperformed at 60% accuracy. But in fact, what is accuracy? Accuracy tells us overall how good we were predicting both the canceled flights and the ones that were not canceled. But is this really our problem? Remember that we are after the 1.5% of flights that are getting canceled in the United States. So accuracy might not be the measure that we are looking for. Something better for us would be sensitivity. Sensitivity tells us how well we did when we predicted canceled flights without losing out on the not predicting incorrectly not canceled flight when in fact they were truly canceled. And here you can see that our models drastically underperformed. XGBoost 12%, the best performing one is Random Forest 55%. Not good at all. We had to improve this. Just recently, we were talking to you about how cancellations differ in fact from carrier to carrier. There are operational aspects in there that need to be taken into account. So how can we use this information really? We decided to look in our data set and find some patterns that actually could segment our carriers better. And this is what we found. So actually we took clustering techniques and we managed to find out there are 3 different groups in our data set. Attending to distance travel, so miles per route on an average monthly figure and the number of canceled flights, we obtained 3 groups. And they classify as follows. We have the carriers that are the best flyers, they fly the most, but their number of cancellations are very low. Compared to this group, we have the happy middle. They fly relatively less, but look at the number of cancellations, they are quite high. And there's something specific about this third group. They have 19 canceled flights on average per month, whereas the distance is very, very low. So what happened here? We actually investigated our group and we found out that in fact these are bankrupt carriers and we decided to remove them from our analysis. And this is how our metrics look like now. XGBoost performed quite well, sensitivity 78%, accuracy 95%. You can see the rest actually did pretty well as well. To sum up, we built around 30 odd models, and our technical goal was actually to travel from a quadrant of high accuracy, low sensitivity to higher sensitivity overall. We think we did pretty well. And now, if you're wondering about what actually did our models take into account when they were classifying flights, they looked at the distance, destination, maximum mean speed as top features in terms of importance, whereas plane age, plane manufacturing year or head were actually not being used. Not origin of flight neither. So for the next part on the recommendations and conclusions, I will hand it over to Lucy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ramsey. So we've talked you through how we took 3 sources of open source data and created a predictive flight model. Now we're going to provide you with some recommendations. If Amadeus were to increase the accuracy of the predictive flight models, they would do this by cross-validating the open source data with proprietary customer information. They could then increase access to data internally. They would do this via a data warehouse and following the extract, load, and transform process, the ELT process. This would do the pre-processing and if they made their data available to the entire enterprise, this would reduce processing time. If they merge the first 2 recommendations together, they would create a travel intelligence service. This travel intelligence service would be a transversal line of business and would increase their revenue. Finally, we would ask them to leverage the flight predictive models to their adjacent lines of business. So say we predicted that a flight is going to be cancelled because of weather. There's not much that the airline can do about this, but look after their stranded passengers to protect their brand and reduce churn. Amadeus would be in a great position to offer their hotels and transfers business to the airlines to look after these stranded passengers. Therefore, in conclusion, we would say that we started this presentation by telling you that 1.5% of flights globally were cancelled in 2017. With just this proof of concept model, Amadeus now has the capability to calculate, to predict 11.2 thousand flights. That's 2.2 million passengers that they could help if their flights were cancelled. Further, if they increase the sensitivity and the accuracy of the model, they would be able to increase their revenue as well as the airlines, their customers. In 2017, about $750 billion was the revenue for the airline industry. The London School of Economics predicts that if we're able to predict in advance cancellations, delays, and deviations, they could save the industry $11 billion. Amadeus is in a key position for this. $11 billion, that's a huge amount of money. Thank you very much for your time, and we're now open for questions.
So that aha moment was pretty interesting to know how the models improved. I'm actually pretty curious. I mean, I've been through data quite a few times. How do you find this out? I mean, how do you come to the conclusion that suddenly this airline, I mean, do you go check the news, or is it one of the variables, or what happened?
So, in fact, we did all this. So we did quite some research in terms of our data set. This is all open source information. One first exercise was actually to understand how we can enrich the data. And obviously the best way for us, given that this was statistic talking broadly about the industry, we wanted to bring in carrier-specific information. At this point, we started getting familiar with the airlines and everything. And then obviously we were not happy with our models, and we tried to force some sort of grouping, some sort of segmentation. We didn't know exactly on what. Was it the carrier? Was it the route? We tried different options. Obviously, that's why the great numbers of models. We stick to the carriers because it makes sense to have patterns in terms of how they behave. You have economy flights, or economy carriers, you have high-end carriers. So this kind of segmentation gave us the best results and made economic sense. We did check the news indeed, and for example, we did see that in fact there is a waterfall effect when one company goes bad in terms of, in this industry, one company gets delays, gets cancellations, there is a waterfall effect that actually affects that specific company. And we wanted to isolate this kind of effects, so take it out from the data sets, predict specifically for that company, because otherwise it will affect your overall results. In our case, predicting for the whole population of carriers did not make sense. I don't know. Have I answered the question?
Was it all of them because the company shut down, or all of them?
So the last group specifically, yes, indeed, larger part of them, Comair, Eagle, for example, they indeed were shut down. Other ones were absorbed in through mergers and acquisitions. So I think that you can actually go ahead and predict specifically for kind of merger and acquisition type of events, but since we have to look globally at the problem, we wanted to use segmentation and kind of pick and choose and predict targeted and have targeted models.
Thank you.
Yeah, congratulations. It was an excellent presentation. Yeah. So my question is just to know if your major challenge was on the data acquisition, data preparation, or on the modeling side.
So in our particular case, definitely the challenge was more on the data acquisition side of it, for one particular reason, in fact. So when you have weather information, it becomes, one, either very voluminous to get all that information, and two, it becomes very difficult to cross-match. That's part of the reason why we also decided to focus the locations of what we're targeting, because otherwise just the sheer amount of data that we would have to process was very overwhelming. So yes, it was definitely one of our biggest challenges. The modeling part was easy by comparison.
Right. That's why we added in the recommendations. Obviously, if we had the operational data, we could look in and we could work with the airlines themselves to find specific intricacies that are happening. Obviously, we worked with public data, and with public data, you can have an idea of what's going on, but then you can't get even more resources. Yeah. Any more questions?
I only have a very small comment. I would like to remark. I think that you did, and it's very, very, it is a trend in the industry, is that it's very valuable to use the third-party data, external data from the companies, is the best way to apply it, because in other case, all the companies are into the value. And the third-party data is the answer for a lot of questions that you cannot see through your internal data. So congrats. And the good presentation, but even a better methodology applies to information.
Thank you very much. And as the last group, we're going to have Nielsen Group.
Just the person. Yeah. Nice smoothly. Sorry.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Ina, and today, along with my teammates Tanya and Fernando, we're going to be speaking to you about driving beverage sales through granular market data. A few months ago, the American Marketing Association ranked Nielsen as #1 in market research. This may not come as a surprise because Nielsen has offices in over 100 countries, they have over 44,000 employees, and they've pretty much become synonymous with market research. But what you may not know is that Nielsen actually invented market research. In 1932, Arthur C. Nielsen came up with something called the Retail Index, which allowed companies to track food and drugs purchases throughout the United States. For the first time, companies were able to see their share of the market, and this was actually the origin of the term market share. Then, throughout the decades, Nielsen continued to innovate. In the 1950s, just when television was starting to get off the ground, they attached devices to televisions in order to see what people were watching. They started to mail out surveys to households that watched television, and again, they combined those two sources of data in order to make statistical estimates that were later very important for advertisers. So today, we're going to be speaking to you about another innovation that Nielsen is in the process of testing. We're going to focus on granular local level data, which beverage companies can use in order to gain new insights about their customers. What's important to understand is that there's a plethora of uses for this kind of data, but we want to focus on 3 use cases today. First, we're going to speak to you about how companies can quantify their market share at a local level, and they can do so by time of day and by location granular enough like zip code. Then we're going to speak to you about how we can segment our customers in a data-driven way in the same local way. And finally, we're going to talk to you about how we can use receipt-level data in order to extract information about partnerships and what products we should bundle. Fernando's going to get us started by telling you a little bit about our data set.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. As Ina very well introduced, our dataset was provided by Nielsen. But before I start talking about it, I would like to mention that for Nielsen, in this case, the clients are not the actual bars. The clients are actually the companies that produce alcoholic beverages. So with this in mind, our dataset consisted in 1 million receipts, which accounted for 3.2 million items. And when I speak about receipts, it's obviously the tickets that every bar keeps in order to keep track of their operations, right? We had sampled about 140 bars across the whole of Spain, and we had about 1 year of data. Because the data is so granular in this case, we had access with a very good level of detail about, for example, the time at the receipt was bought, the number of items, the different kind of products that were bought together, etc. But we also have to mention that our dataset does not come without limitations. For example, it's obviously a very small sample, only 140 bars.
And in fact, it's most of the receipts are divided between Madrid and Barcelona. In specific, 80% of them are actually coming from Barcelona, so we just have to keep that in mind. So, as a team, we wanted to analyze this problem from the lens of a gin producer. So imagine that we're a company that produces gin, right? What kind of data from this data set am I interested in? What kind of insights? For example, what's my position in the market share? How is my product behaving compared to others, or what are the peak hours, etc. So during the exploratory phase of our project, we were able to build this chart, which is showing you the total amount, the top 10 beverages sold during the day. On the x-axis, you actually can see the hours, and on the y-axis, you can see the volume in units in this case. But we want to focus specifically on what's going on with gin. And here we can see that gin follows a very interesting pattern, because it starts peaking at around 7 or 8 in the afternoon, and it continues to rise until more or less 12, 1, around that time it starts decreasing. But yeah, this is very interesting, but how do we use this from a business perspective, right? Well, the first thing that's coming to my mind right now is that if I am a gin producer, I really want to make sure the bars do not run out of gin during the peak hours. So we can use this information to actually define better our strategies when we're delivering our product to the venues, right? And if we continue with gin, we also built this hierarchical tree map, which in fact every little rectangle of this tree map is showing you a percentage of the market share in terms of sales revenue, right? And we can see that Tanqueray is actually leading the market. So from this point on, we continued and we decided to focus specifically on Tanqueray for the rest of our analysis. So this is great, we're on first position, but can we actually improve this? Can we actually make this better? Well, I will let now my colleague Tanya talk about the machine learning part and how we can make this better.
Thank you. So as we mentioned earlier, today we're going to talk to you about 3 specific use cases and how this data can be actually applied. So the first case, imagine I'm a Tanqueray brand manager and I want to quantify brand performance by time and location. Now, until today, the most detailed level of understanding market share, even with, let's say, the Nielsen panel data, has been at the province level and at the week level. So I can see how my brand performed against my competitors last week in the province of Madrid, let's say, but I can't see anything more granular than that. Now, what about in our data set, and what about specifically in gin? So we saw that we have 65 unique gin brands, and Tanqueray is actually present in more than 90% of the bars that we serve. And as Fernando mentioned, Tanqueray appears to be the market leader, at least in our data set. But what if we actually looked at it per time of the day? So in the graph on the right, you can see how Tanqueray performs in terms of market share at different times of day against its main competitor, Seagram's. So you see that at night, at the bottom right, Tanqueray is really strong, but during the day, such as lunchtime or evening, Seagram's is actually much better. But again, this is looking at all of Spain. What if we wanted to understand the same dynamic at a more local level? For example, a neighborhood in the center of Barcelona. So this is the exact same graph, however, zooming in central Barcelona. This is the neighborhood of El Born, postal code 08003. You can see that Tanqueray not only is not an important player, it's in fact almost insignificant in comparison to its other competitors. So what do we get out of this? This information allows us to focus on the areas and the times of the day where our brand is, let's say, under or overperforming. It allows us to create, to make better decisions about when to run promotions and really when to tackle our competitors. Use case number 2. I want to segment my customers at a local level. Now, what does this mean exactly? So companies already use a variety of different methods to segment their customers, right? They use demographic segmentation, behavioral segmentation, and even recently we see persona definition from design thinking. But what we're going to propose is, as we've heard from many of the other presentations today, is to use a clustering method. How clustering works is, well, we group our observations by the similarity of their characteristics. In our case, our observations are actually the groups of people who buy products together. So all of the individuals that appear in a single receipt. So we group them we're able to group them at the city or province level and looking at only the people that have consumed within the group the specific brand, so Tanqueray. So what do we see, for example, in the province of Barcelona? We have identified 5 distinct clusters, and the 2 most interesting ones I see on the left, you can see on the left. We see the late night partiers, and you see the happy hours. And these clusters have completely distinct behaviors. Late night partiers actually are a slightly bigger group. They consume half the amount of drinks than the happy hours do, at least in the same receipt. They go out at a different time of the week, right? Late night partiers pay at 2 a.m. on Saturday night for their receipts, while the happy hours are Friday and Saturday around 7 p.m. And in fact, they even go to different types of venues. So the late night partiers go to bar de copas and discos, which have been grouped together here, while happy hours actually go to restaurants. And finally, we're able to see what other products do these people buy and how are these different products, how do they differ between the clusters. So this kind of information can be used to enrich our existing understanding of segments of our customers, and it could be done at a more local level than would have been done until now. And now Ina's going to talk to you about associations between products.
Thank you, Tanya. So how were we able to extract information about partnerships from receipts? We used a machine learning technique called association rules, also known as market basket analysis. And usually this is something that supermarkets use in order to plan their store displays. Anytime that you learn about market basket analysis, you're going to hear about the same classic example. One supermarket ran all of their receipts through this analysis, and they saw a strong association between diapers and beer. So this may not be the most obvious association, but they put the beer next to the diapers in their store, and they found that they were actually able to drive beer sales. So what's important here is that there's an inherent association between these 2 products. So the customers already want to buy them together, and you just need to remind them. So when a customer comes in to buy diapers, they'll also grab a 6-pack if they see it. What does this have to do with gin? We ran our receipts through the same analysis, and we wanted to see what associations we could find with Tanqueray. And the most interesting one that we saw was an association between Tanqueray and Smirnoff. This is very lucky because both of these products are owned by Diageo, so actually it would be quite simple to promote them together. And an economic analysis of this would work in this way. So we have about 13,000 receipts that have Smirnoff on them. That's about 1% of our whole data set. And of those 1%, we have 59% of receipts in which Tanqueray and Smirnoff show up together. So the 41% of receipts where we see just Smirnoff and not Tanqueray represents our opportunity to compare groups of people that are already drinking Smirnoff to convert those people to Tanqueray. So let's say that we offer them a 5% discount and assume about a 30% conversion rate. In our data set, we saw that that would actually result in a 6% uplift in revenue. What's important here is that we don't have Tanqueray's internal data, and if we did, we'd really enrich this analysis. And we can also market products to individual customers, not just groups of customers. So for example, we know that gin and tonic have an association, but which gin and which tonic may be a question that we have. So what we saw was that Royal Bliss is the tonic that's most paired with Tanqueray, and we can think of similar promotions that we can have. So far, we've been talking to you about how, extracting these findings, and now we want to show you about how we did this. We actually built a tool which a marketing manager could use in order to see these kinds of findings. So for a second, let's imagine that I am the marketing manager of Tanqueray. I would go to the left-hand side and type in my brand, which is Tanqueray. I could decide whether I want to look at my market share by volume or by value. And then I can actually see what share I have during different parts of the day, and I can also see my competitor share. So now let's say that I want to see my market share in a different province, like Barcelona. Again, I can compare my share, I can see how Tanqueray is doing, I can then go into a municipality and check how I'm doing there, like Manresa, and then I can try to decide which groups of people I want to focus on during this analysis, and I go into the clusters. I see which clusters I have, I see which percentage of my customers are in those clusters, I then can see which drinks they're buying together, like the vodka that we mentioned, and then I can check my association rules. So here you see the Royal Bliss that we mentioned, and you see the Smirnoff that we mentioned, and all of the statistics associated with them. And on the top, we also populated the definitions of those statistics in case those may be useful to you. So what's very important about this analysis is that we've been focusing on Tanqueray and gin, but really this tool is scalable to any product. You can use this with any beverage at all and run the analysis in the same way. So now I'm going to leave this with Tanya, who will tell you what we want you to remember today.
Thank you. So what did we really learn today? The main idea that we want to leave you with is that this new method that Nielsen is using to collect receipt level data allows us to see information about our customers and about our products that we did not have access to before. We talked to you about 3 specific use cases. We talked about how we can quantify our brand performance by location and by time of day. And we also talked to you about how we can enrich our existing segmentation of users by using cluster analysis. And using those 2 together, we can actually make better decisions about where, when, and to whom to target our advertising budget. Finally, we talked to you about how we can discover the already existing undercover associations between products that people already have in the back of their head and use that information to create better decisions about bundling or about partnerships. And so as a parting note, I just want to again to remind you that here we only looked at 3 specific examples, but in reality, there's a lot of room for creativity in how this data can be used. And thank you very much for being here. And thank you especially to the Nielsen team who are around every single week to help us out. Thanks. Any questions?
This is not fair because that you don't have a lot of time now, but I would like to ask you something. What type of external data can you use to enrich and mix data with Nielsen data provider?
We actually did try to use external data. So we merged data. So in the beginning, we tried to find if we could figure out what condition leads to people buying gin, yes or no. And so we used external data in terms of dates. So we incorporated national holidays, the local holidays, and also major sports events like programs. So we tried to see whether those would actually lead to data to gin being bought or not. And in fact, we found absolutely no association in the case of gin, so we didn't really talk about this today. But we could use this kind of data.
Congratulations, very good idea. And just another example of external data useful for that is the population. And the population is an open source data that you can find in INE, for example. And most interesting data could be the mobility data. That means the information that you can use taking into account the mobility of the people, because in this case, perhaps at the finish of this beautiful event, we can have some rain near here, and this is not the place in which you are living. So you can use this mobility data to understand when you are living, when you are sleeping, when you are working, and therefore when you are having a good drink with your friends. And that. Congratulations.
Any questions?
Yes. Did you have some info about the nationality of the buyers?
No, we had no information about the customers, only the receipt data. So we weren't even able to tell whether it was one person buying one drink, just the drinks that were on the
A question about the location analysis that you did. So this is applied, so is it obvious then for that guy, they would see it at aggregate level, at the week level you mentioned already, they will already see that they're not performing very well in Barcelona, for example. Is it something that's specific per area? Would they be able to say, okay, I will aggregate these 4 postcodes, and you could give them insights, any kind of insights of what they could do in order to, in those postcodes. What are you doing right in some other areas and different in other areas?
Do you mean what recommendations we can give them, or whether it's possible to gain those?
Is it possible to give the kind of insights?
Okay, so at the moment, the data set is not representative. We only have 140 bars in total. But theoretically, once we have a representative sample, then yes, they would be able to go into the specific zip code and see how they're performing in that zip code by the time of day. And then if you wanted to aggregate a couple of zip codes together, you could do that as well.
I see you developed the whole website or a tool available for them. Is that something that you could use right away? I mean, that it's not one specific example, it's a whole data set and they could play with the whole thing themselves?
Yes. Right now it's a bit buggy, but but yes, if it was improved, I mean, the data behind it is the correct data, the actual cluster analysis for all brands and all provinces. Thank you.
Well, I am so impressed. Congratulations. And please keep in mind the IE Learning Analytics team if you ever have any appetite. Very, very, very impressive. Let me actually close the event, and before we all go and have some drinks together, let me do some thank yous and awards. First of all, the boot campers who are at the center of the event today, there are some awards for you today. So we will be calling you in, and Ivan will be handing the awards, and after that, we'll rally all together around that. Go ahead.
Perfect. So basically, we defined a few aspects, and we thought that it was great to evaluate our boot campers in the way they would collaborate, the way they would share, the way they would understand each other. So we've created a few prizes to congratulate those that have taken the most effort into helping others, by different categories. So the first category is what we've called the social butterfly. So the one that was able to most share the content of the bootcamp on their social medias, on their Facebook pages, Instagram pictures, and in all of their events. So that is basically going for a fun time.
Very funny because actually I was the only one sharing the information.
The second one, because it's a bootcamp and pressure is one of the main characteristics, we find while everyone is stressed, you're cold as ice, right? So we created that one. I think they all know who we're talking about. It's Jorge Zeller. And the third prize we built with what we call the data ambassador. So the one that took the most time to looking into the data, trying to communicate what was in there, trying to share graphs of all kinds, explanations of all kinds, or even small samples to show to everyone, and get everyone to understand what's going on in there. So that prize is for Tanya. Extra prizes for the instructors, which all the students voted. I want to ensure that, well, let's see what the impression was. So the first one is for the most eloquent professor, the one that spoke the most, and that's for Pablo. Don't go too far, Pablo, because we also had the second one, which was thank you for making yourself available to us. So all the students also voted Pablo for this second. And finally, the third prize is for the trendiest instructor, the one with more trendy in all of their methods. And that was Maria. Great. So, Teresa, you had something else?
Go ahead and then I'll.
Yeah, so, well, thank you very much from my side. Sorry at the beginning I didn't introduce myself. As I said, Ivan Martin. I'm the academic director of the bootcamp. I make sure that all the content is properly coordinated, and of course they understand everything throughout the program. At the very beginning, they have to start understanding how to code, how to extract data, how to see it, how to read it, how to plot it. Then once they got that, then we need to get them to, okay, now that I got all of this content, I can have access to the data of the different companies that we've seen today. And those companies, of course, at the very beginning, they receive a huge data set. They don't know how to open it, how to see it. Of course not. I mean, there are all of these kind of variables which are extremely complicated to plot or to visualize. So eventually, a few weeks through the bootcamp, they start seeing how they can implement this with their corresponding projects. And once they already feel like they dominate it, then we start with machine learning, where everything starts over. Combining the maths and all the technology behind it, so all the technical part of the programming. Eventually, they're able to create the projects, and I would like to take 1 second from my time and your time to congratulate all of the boot campers, the great effort they've done in this, and the extremely good results they've been able to present today, which I think that most of us were extremely surprised, if not all of us. Thank you very much, guys.
Get ready for the photo call. Well, are you ready? Are you sure you have your right side? So while we take those pictures, and again, a very impressive group, coming from God knows how many different countries. Love the diversity of languages, gender, ages, and very, very, very impressed with everything you did today. So I want to make sure we get the right picture. While we get this going, I didn't want to end this event without thanking a number of people who've actually made this happen. And build, hopefully, what was a wonderful learning experience. Stay here, stay here. So first, thank you very much to the jury for taking the time to listen to these presentations and probe on the methods, the learning, the data they used. It's a treat to have you. And you've been with us for now, this is the 3rd edition, so thank you for being part of this. Want to thank very particularly to Ivan. And please, can you join for the photo call the instructors in the boot camp? And I will ask as well, Daniela, who actually made their everyday experience quite a difference. Woo! Okay, can you do it? Well, go for the 3rd edition of IE Exponential Learning Data Science Bootcamp. Go for it. On this, drinks are ready. Please take the time to meet all of them.
Vale, espera. Oh, espera.